All right, let's talk about participles in Latin. First of all, what is a participle? Well, participle is really just an adjective that comes from a verb, and we call those verbal adjectives. So, an example of that in English would be the boy runs to the store. We can agree that runs is a verb because it's an action word. But what we can do with that verb is we can change it so it describes something, so we make it into an adjective, and that means it's a participle. So the running boy trips and falls. Our new verb now is trips and falls, and the word run has become an adjective. So instead of having like a regular adjective like the tall boy or the slow boy, we have the running boy, and we have an adjective that comes from a verb. Another example would be the girl loves cats. So loves is our action word, it's our verb, but we can also use it as an adjective to describe something. The loved cats are very happy. So we just took our verb and we made it into an adjective. So that's all a participle really is. It's at its heart an adjective, but it was, before it was an adjective, a verb. So because it comes from a verb, it's always good to start with our principal parts in Latin, because every verb has principal parts. And these principal parts are where we're going to derive our participles from. So our second principal part, the infinitive, gives us two participles. It will give us the present active and the future passive. And the future passive is also called the gerundive. And our fourth principal part will give us two other participles. It will give us the perfect passive and the future active. And that's really all the participles there are in Latin. There's just the four, two that come from the infinitive and two that come from the fourth principal part, which is the perfect passive participle. So we look at the present active participle. It's translated, if we're going to use the verb to love, loving, or you can say while loving. The key there is the ing. And it comes from the stem of the infinitive. You take the re off. And what we're going to do is we're going to add specific endings that tell us that it's a participle. So you can see for the nominative singular, the ending is ns, which you can remember as nominative singular. And the way to identify the forms in all the other parts are this nt that you can see in every other form besides the nominative singular. And the nt will help you remember that it's present participle. And so anytime you see a word that either ends in ns or has an nt in it, it's verbing. It's a present active participle. So the other participle that comes from our infinitive is the future passive participle, which is also called the gerundive. And it's future and passive, so the translation is going to be loved or about to be loved. It's got that future idea, it's got that passive idea in it. We'll use the same stem from the infinitive, and then we just add our special endings to show us that it's a gerundive. Gerundives have second and first declension endings, so I picked the masculine, so us, I, o, I, orum, is, os, is. But if you were to describe something that was feminine, you would use feminine endings, or describe something that's neuter, you would use neuter endings. But instead of putting them all on the chart, I just picked masculine. So you can see the key to identifying the future passive or the gerundive is this nd that's in every form. And just like the nt told us it was present, the nd reminds us it's a gerundive, like the nd in gerundive. And those are the two that come from the infinitive. Pretty easy. So let's look about the ones that come from the fourth principal part. The perfect passive participle is the first one. It is the fourth principal part. We don't have to do anything, add any letters, change anything. The fourth principal part is the perfect passive participle. And you translate it having been verbed, having been loved, or you can just say loved. If you're using a deponent verb, because it's translated actively, it really is a perfect active participle, which otherwise doesn't exist in Latin. So you'd say having verbed instead of having been verbed. So for example, loquor, to speak, is deponent. So you can say locutus, having spoken. And this only works for deponents. And so to change this, you just change it like a normal adjective. You change it to match the noun it describes in gender, number, and case. So we don't have to do anything special with the perfect passive participle. And then our last one, the future active participle. We take the fourth principal part and we're going to add the letters UR before the ending. And it's about to love or going to love to make it future. And then we just change our endings for case and number. I picked the masculine again, us, e, o, o. But if you were going to describe something that was feminine, you'd use feminine endings. So the thing that you can recognize here is there's an UR in every form, because we had to add that to the fourth principal part. And that reminds us that it's the future active participle. So the UR just like the word future. So there's a lot of different things you can do with participles. You can make infinitives, you can make purpose clauses with gerundives. There's lots of different things. So that's just basically the participles themselves with no extra things added onto them. So let's look at some examples of each kind. Quota pugnans interficitur. So pugnans has the ns, which tells us it's a present active participle. So quota is killed while fighting. We say quota fighting is killed. Libri legendi ad scholam portantur. The legendi has the nd in it, which tells us it's a gerundive. The books about to be read are carried to school. Verba a cane audita dico. Audita is the fourth principal part with no special additions or subtractions. So this is a perfect passive participle. It agrees with verba. So I say words heard by the dog. Puer aquam portaturus occidit. The portaturus has the UR in it that tells us it's a future active participle. So the boy about to carry water died. So really, the idea is make sure you know how to identify each participle and how it's translated. And there's really only 4, so it's not too much to remember. Just make those connections between what letters you're looking for and then how to translate it. And then you'll be perfect with participles.